Okay, hi everybody, and welcome to our last module of Forsa School. My name is Nahla Tabba. I'm one of the co-founders, along with Rania Jishi from Naqd Critic and Sharjah Art Foundation. And Forsa School was ultimately this way to open up a dialogue between creative practitioners here in the UAE and to arm us with the skills, the tactics, and the strategies we need to really get through our careers, specifically in the UAE. I have with me Maryam and Yusur at Dabbagh, best known for their PR consultancy company, Rouya, founded in 2015 to provide strategies in PR and communications. And of course, we've seen your work across the board in arts and culture. You have done a brilliant job. So there are no better people to talk about this idea of what happens, like what are the gaps between artists and the creative community and the opportunities that they have and the way they can conduct PR as individuals, but also how do you bridge the gaps between being a creative practitioner and journalists who are out there who are armed with the tools to ultimately tell our stories. Now, what happened last year was particularly difficult because we were all forced to propel ourselves into a world where we kind of were on our own in terms of representing ourselves. And so we'd love to hear from you both your thoughts and insights on these different topics. So I will leave it to you. For everybody else who has joined, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A section of this. And yeah, I'll leave it to you both, ladies. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Nahla.
Thank you, Nahla. Very, very happy to be here. If you allow me to start, Yusur, I would like to just give a very, very brief introduction because I know you're going to do a wonderful job in taking us through what PR is. So my name is Maryam and Yusra, and I'm sure you guessed from our shared last name, we're sisters and we're partners, and we've been working together since 2004. People don't know this about us, but we've actually worked together on an art publication in 2004, and we stayed working together until she left me and went to work with one of the biggest international PR agencies in Dubai. But then we joined forces again in 2015, and given our individual experiences working in PR, so I worked on and off with some of the best organizations, including the Sharjah Art Foundation that we're collaborating with today. And Yusur has also worked with several reputable art organizations in the UAE. And together we joined forces in 2015 and started Rouya. And I couldn't be happier, honestly, to have a better partner and a better half, though my husband is not going to be super excited to hear this, but definitely my better half in Rouya. So without further ado, I just want to say that we're gonna take you through a presentation. We're not big fans of presentations ourselves, but I think it's important that we structure our conversation through and explain some of the like general understanding of what PR is. Some of you might already know this, and some of you could think of this as new information, and that's absolutely fine. And then we're going to open the floor for any questions or rants or any sort of grievances you want to share with us and how we can help you with our experience resolve them, inshallah. So Yusur, I leave the floor to you.
Thank you so much, Maryam, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much to Sharjah Art Foundation and Forsa School for giving us the opportunity to share sort of the what is PR all about, because some people think that PR stands for press release, and we want to change that. So we're going to start with what is PR. There are, since the 70s, there are several definitions that came out on what PR is. Because of the different sort of practices and disciplines within PR, associations internationally are still coming up on a yearly basis, coming up with new definitions on what PR is. So the latest definitions that the Chartered Institute of Public Relations in the UK have come up with is that public relations is about reputation. It's the result of what you do, what you say, and what others say about you, which is straightforward, and we can all agree with that. As for the International Association of PR, they said that it's a decision-making management practice tasked with building relationship interests between organizations and their publics. As I said, there are zillion of definitions out there about what PR is. there isn't one clear definition that everyone sort of works with. As for us and Rouya, we believe that it's a sort of a management of communication between the organization and its public. How is the organization or the individual or the brand is targeting or having a conversation with the public or increasing awareness about something specific that the brand is working on. That it's what PR is. It's sort of a link, a bridge between the organization and the public. Sorry, Maryam, you want to say something?
No, I wanted to just absolutely add to what you were saying and say that for us in Rouya, we've also emphasized, and when we think about PR, is what are the publics, and it's not only one public. It's really, really important to understand that there are several publics within the big global public, and especially nowadays with the digital sphere being another public that we think about, this idea of the local and the global is also blurred. So it's really, really important to think with the person as a public relations expert or a consultant or even an associate, to think with the brand, the company, the organization, the person, to think with them what are their identified publics and find ways, like Yusur said, to bridge between those different publics and the actual brand or organization. And the bridge is usually through the different communication channels that exist that we will speak about.
Having said that, obviously, there are different disciplines and practices within PR. There is public affairs, there's crisis communication, there are different and several practices within PR, but it really depends on the brand and the organization on what they need and what their organizational objective is. And accordingly, the PR can be then determined on what is it exactly that they would like to achieve within the PR practice. Nahla, I just want to ask, do you want us to give a chance for the audience to ask questions, or do we continue?
I mean, please go ahead and continue. As I receive questions, they'll be either in the chat and the Q&A, and I can throw them in at you. I might also have a few questions too.
Okay, perfect. Now, thinking about PR, we want to think about how do we strategically plan, develop on a PR plan. The first thing that we need to think of is a situational analysis. Analyzing the situation the current situation you are in. So whether it was an organization or an individual or a brand, again, you need to think of your current situation and where do you want to be? What do you want to be perceived as? What is why do you want to increase awareness about a certain cause, about a certain campaign? Why do you want to do it? So analyzing your current situation by using several tools. The first tool is the SWOT analysis, which is the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Understanding what are your strengths, and obviously all of these four, will help you plan your PR better, will help you understand exactly what do you want to achieve, rather than just saying we want coverage in Vogue magazine or we want coverage in Harper's Bazaar, which is not wrong, but you're not thinking strategically on why do you want coverage in those publications. So the first section would be the strengths. You can think of basic questions like, what are your assets? What is your strongest assets? How is your business different than your competitors? And what is your unique selling proposition? For weaknesses, you can think of in what areas do you need to improve? What expertise do you lack? What areas your competitors better than you are? What complaints do you regularly hear from your customers? So these are general questions. Obviously, these will be available in the, we will make them available in the toolkit. We will add this slide as well, Nahla. And you can just go through this exercise and so you can understand your brand more, whether you're working in an organization or working on your personal brand. These questions will help you identify what is the problem or what is the challenge or what do you want to achieve. So you can plan your PR.
Yeah. Sorry, if I may add something, you said we often think about SWOT like for people who went to university or people who went to school and did any business course, and SWOT we usually be like, yeah, but I know all of these things. I know my strengths, I know my weaknesses. But the question is like once you actually do this exercise, you realize you really don't. And oftentimes with our clients, we find that it's not they emphasize a lot on their weaknesses, and we tend to always see the things that we are not good at. But more times than few, we find that a lot of the brands don't know what their strengths are and don't know where the opportunity lies. And these exercises, as dreadful as they may sound at the beginning, but once you do them, you really know how best to position yourself, and you start understanding your brand, or your brand could be yourself or your organization or your business much better. So it's really, really highly effective method of just trying to frame where you're standing right now.
Can I ask specifically how you've had possibly artists or individuals do this exercise as well? Because I think particularly with art practices and production, we internalize the process so much that, you know, we rely on galleries, possibly journalists put that out there, but we're not necessarily aware of audience building or putting it out there. In fact, that's probably the most nerve-wracking bit. Would you advise that this is something that applies, as technical as it feels, happen to something as organic as an art practice?
This is a very difficult question because it depends on what the artist wants to achieve. This is something that we've had experience in, especially Yusur, when in early 2020, early 2019 as well, I think 2019, 2020, she proposed that we do the pay it forward kind of work with individuals on figuring out their messaging and their branding, just so that we can continue to support our small business, SME, and creative individuals' practices and ecosystem. And we found that, like, I'm just going to give you an example to answer your question. We had one of one of my favorite designers and artists, I'm not going to mention her name, she approached us to help her with this exercise. And we realized that she didn't know what she wanted out of her brand. So she complained about her presence on social media. She complained about the lack of press on her practice and her work, although she had exhibited in, I think, 2 group exhibitions that were quite prominent. But when we did this exercise with her, and it was in a friendly conversation format, we were sitting at the office, I mean, at what is now considered the old times when we could sit together, and we were just doing this post-it notes kind of exercise with our partner, who's obsessed with post-it notes. And we realized that she didn't actually know what makes her, like, what differentiates her art practice from others. So it's not necessarily, I don't want artists to only think of it in terms of selling or the competitive advantage in the market, but to actually think about their practice and what distinguishes each artist, their practice from other practices, or not even, like, even if it doesn't distinguish it, even if it actually follows a specific pattern that they're happy to be, that their practice is actually happy to follow. Then this idea of the threats was really, triggering for her, because we realized that some of the threats that she feels affect her business is actually the lack of the opportunities on top. So all of the opportunities that were present, that she knows are available to her after we discussed her strengths and weaknesses, the fact that she's articulate, the fact that she's friendly, the fact that she's approachable, the fact that she's emerging and yet exhibited several times, that her practice is very concerned with the day-to-day life in the UAE. We realized that most of her threats that were actually, what she perceived as threats, were actually the lack of opportunities that were already there. So it was part insecurity about her practice, and part like the worst kind of assumption on the near future. When in fact the threats were competition, the threats were lack of exhibition viewing, the threats were eventually in 2020 the closure of art spaces and the inability of artists to produce work that is visible in museums and in galleries where actual humans visit, like in real life. These were threats that we put forward in 2020 after the pandemic started happening, and she realized that her threats were actually not the threats within, but the actual threats to her practice, the dissemination of her work. If she stops posting about her work, if she stops communicating, that's a threat. If her work gets hacked, and yada, yada, yada. So I don't want to get into so many details, but I just want to reiterate that when we think about this exercise, we have to think about the objective of doing this exercise. There's definitely the competitive advantage. There's definitely the corporate advantage, but there's also understanding where your practice is positioned vis-a-vis the other artists and other creatives around you.
Thank you.
The next tool would be identifying your target audience. So thinking of your stakeholders and because there is, when we talk to clients or artists or creative practitioners, when we tell them who is your target audience, their response would be the general public. There is no such thing as the general public, although it can be accepted, but you can't just keep it general to all the public would be thinking that all the public would be interested in your work or in what you do or in your vision and mission. So thinking of your target audience, who are you approaching? Who are you targeting with the media dissemination that you're doing? Whether it was from the public or from the organizations as stakeholders, or most importantly, the media. So identifying those will help you craft your PR plan in a better way that you would know that each key message is targeting a certain audience that you would like to target. This is a very important as well. This is not, people clients, when we talk to them, they say, no, we're targeting families, we're targeting mothers and children, we're targeting artists, we're targeting creative practitioners. This is great, but how are you doing that? It can be with certain programs that they do. It can be with certain talks that they do, or an exhibition that does target kids or does target artists. Identifying those and understanding who are you communicating with is very important. The third one, Maryam, would you like to take it from here?
Sure. So once you've understood your position, once you've understood what your strengths are and who you want to communicate with, then it's time to draft your communication objectives. Yusur is a big fan of the SMART module, which is basically a synonym of, it's short for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And these are it's just one of the hundreds of guidelines that you have to set up your communication objectives. But we personally and internally use this, where we want you to be very specific with what your communication objectives are. So you set up your communication objective, be very specific. And this is an internal document. This is not something that is going to go on your website or in your social media. So you can be as specific as you want. The more specific you are, the better results that you will lead. So, and make the words less jargony, more clear, and focused on what you want to do. Let your objective also be measurable, in the sense that it could include numbers. And we don't mean money by numbers, but it could also be money. Say that one of my objectives this year with my brand is to reach X amount of people, is to be included in X amount of exhibitions, is to get 100 likes on one post, for example. But have a measurable objective that you can then monitor or at least reflect on after a certain period of time and see that you've achieved it. And also the objective has to be attainable. An objective is not an aspiration. An aspiration can be, God knows I have so many unrealistic aspirations, but they remain aspirations and they remain hopes and dreams and in my bucket list. But my objectives are attainable. So I know that I need to do this and I can do this. And of course, the relevancy is really important. So make sure that your communications objective about your brand are relevant to your brand and relevant to your progress right now, and try not to deviate away from your actual practice today. And time bound. Don't have communication objectives that are floating, that are eternal. Like say these are my objectives for the next 6 months. These are my objectives for this year. The more specific the dates you are, the better work that you're gonna do to achieve those objectives. Yusur, if you wanna move to the second slide, to the other slide, sorry.
Developing a basic PR plan. Obviously, PR plans, there are several templates out there that you can download and use, and they can be as detailed as possible, or they can be different than what you're thinking or different than what you want. We are giving you today a basic PR plan that you can work with, whether you are in an organization, whether you're working as an individual creative practitioner and you want to share your PR plan with the organization that you're working with, or you're doing it for your own practice. This is a basic PR plan that you can follow and use, and is available in the toolkit that will be shared, that will be provided to everyone. So the first thing that you need to identify in your PR plan is thinking about the overview and the objective. What is the project? What is it? Define it. When and where will it happen? who is involved in this project, any organization, any curators, other artists that are involved in it. What is the objective of this plan? What do you want to achieve? What is your goal and what do you want to achieve? The second step would be identifying the key messages. So after you've identified your target audience, you want to craft key messages that you want your target audience to hear and remember. Always use them. Yani احنا when we work with, apologies if I use any Arabic words, just let me know if, when we work with clients, we always tell them, for example, if you're in a press release, if you're identifying or you're writing what is your organization is, continue using the same message, reiterate it all the time so the public are aware that when they hear like Nike, when you see just do it as a slogan, you would think of Nike. The same with organizations, although it's a bit more complicating because it would be long. It's not a slogan that is catchy, but something that they would hear and they would understand that, for example, this organization does this and this and this. This artist does this and this and this. Keep reiterating the same key messages and tweak it with the announcement that you're sending. So if you're announcing that you're participating in a certain exhibition, tweak your angle and your key messages to the exhibit to be more exhibition specific, while keeping the main idea, the main key message there. The third thing would be an announcement timeline. So if you need to think about what types of announcements you'll be sending. There are several types. There is the press release, which is usually a lengthy kind of announcement that includes all the information. There is a media alert, which is a shorter version that includes some details of the exhibition, the organization, whatever you're working on. And there is a photo caption. A photo caption is literally a photo with a caption. So let's say after an opening of an exhibition, you would dispatch a photo caption of the opening with crowds, along with a caption that says, this organization opened last night, this exhibition. So identifying your announcement type is important, and then identifying when will you dispatch it. So again, I'm just going to give an example of the exhibition and in the art world. Let's say you have an exhibition that is going to open on this date. You need to think 2 weeks minimum before the exhibition opening. You need to send 2 weeks before the announcement that you will be opening that exhibition. You need to give journalists some time to read, go through your email, read the press release, and see if they're interested to develop stories out of it. So 2 weeks is the minimum time. Obviously, you don't want to make it a month, but 2 to 3 weeks is the realistic time to give a journalist some free time to read and go through your press release. The last thing would be, yes, sorry.
Like, can I just do that as an artist or designer or someone working on a project? Like, does be backed by an institution per se? I know that institutions have their own PR and would be taking care of that, but can I, in good taste, just be like, hi, I'm holding?
Of course.
So yeah,
of course.
Sorry, Yusur, if I may also add, I mean, of course you can do this, but if you're doing this with an organization, it's best to coordinate whatever efforts and outreach you're going to do to journalists with the organization so that you don't double down on the journalists. So one of the biggest things that happen that could mix up the PR message is that you as a participant have reached out to X journalists while the organization is also reaching out to X journalists. So the journalist is receiving, let's say, 2 invitations with 2 different messages asking the journalist to attend the exhibition. So it's okay to do it. It's actually favorable to start a relationship with the press, but also inform the organ. If you're indeed doing it with an organization that you know is doing its own PR outreach, it's best to coordinate those efforts. At the end of the day, you're not competing with the organization. They will welcome your outreach, but it's important for them to know so that they don't overlap or send mixed messages. This is really, really important. We also do this with when an organization is working with an exhibition that is coming from abroad and there is another organization involved. So there's usually coordination between 2 PR agencies that are working together to make sure that the flow is consistent, that the messages are the same, and all stakeholders should communicate and coordinate ahead of time.
But just from experience, Nahla, we do recommend that artists or any creative practitioner is involved in the PR plan. So they have the right to ask the organization, when are you dispatching the release? How are you mentioning my name? How are you talking about my work? Who are your target sort of media outlets? Because from experience, we don't see a lot of artists doing that. Some of them do, and they give us like a list of media preferences that they would like to talk about or talk with, or they would say that I'm not comfortable speaking in Arabic, only English publications, please. But we do recommend that the artist gets involved in the PR planning phase, because it is important for them. It is, at the end of the day, it is their reputation. It is about their work. It is increasing awareness about them specifically. So it is recommended that they are in touch with the organization that they're working with, so they can be or contribute to the PR plan that the organization will be providing.
And one of the solutions that Yusur came up with is a press form that we usually send to artists that are participating in some of the exhibitions, especially when we used to have face-to-face interviews. And we ask the artists if they're comfortable being on camera, if they need training, if they speak Arabic, if they speak Arabic but prefer interviews in English, or speak English but prefer interviews in Arabic, or in any other language. So we've created a form that is internal, like we send it to our clients and the clients send it to the artists. And then once we receive them, we understand what is, where this artist can be best positioned. And if indeed they're not comfortable with media exposure, which is absolutely valid, we will then limit it to email interviews. We will help them craft the answers. This is what a good PR practitioner should be doing, is really assisting, like trying to get the maximum coverage on the organization and the artist with the best way, without really without invading their privacy or without making them do something they're not comfortable doing. So this is something that we're very, very careful to do, and we're very sensitive to as well.
Last but not least, in the announcement timeline, the organization or the artist should identify the countries or the region that they're targeting. So some of the artists, let's say, we're just going to take the example of Iraq. Some Iraqi artists actually don't prefer the PR agencies get in touch with Iraqi publications for many reasons, but they do have that preference. So the artist should know who the organization is targeting, whether it was international or regional here. So they would understand what kind of publications will be talking about her or his work. Yeah, the fourth part in the PR plan is the angles.
So let's say the fun part for you, sir.
It is the fun part, because working with several artists, there are a lot of angles out there that can be pitched to journalists, but we try to identify the best ones depending on the journalist's sort of interest. So we would take a day or two to research specific publications and specific writers and see what do they write about, so we can craft our angle that we've identified from the release or from the exhibition brief or whatever it is, to be able to pitch it to the journalist. So it is a lot of work, but there are always results that are coming out of it, because it's research based. You know who you are targeting, you know what is the angle, you know that the journalist is interested in this angle. So you are well prepared, well informed, and you know that you will be getting results of whether either interview or a feature or only just the publishing of the press release that you've shared with the journalist. So identifying angles, sorry, Maryam, is important.
No, please continue your sentence.
La, please, Adi.
Okay, no, I just wanted to say that I wanted to give an example. I always do this to her. She hates it, like outside of this public Zoom, but I always interrupt her. But I just wanted to say, I wanted to give an example. For example, you have an exhibition, you're exhibiting your work, a solo exhibition. You've set up an exhibition with your friends from a specific collective, and your work is concerned with, let's say, feminist discourse in a specific language in the UAE. Right? And so you have one of your target audience, one of your angles obviously is the art angle. This is let's say you're an emerging artist. So there's the emerging artist angle, exhibiting X place. So you have all of the art publications covering this or interested in covering this in a very artsy kind of way. But then you've done your research well, and you really want to use the angle of let's say, feminist research, right? Or research, like writers who write about artists who research feminist discourse in specific languages. And you identify a journalist who've written about this prior to your exhibition about something else. You email this journalist with that angle. So you're not talking about the fact that you're an artist. You're not talking about the collective. You're skipping the details that you would مثلا, give to an art publication, and you're actually focusing on the research that was part of the making of this, because you want this journalist to focus on that. That is an angle. If your angle has an element of technology and you really want one of the tech magazines to write about it, then that is your angle, the technology bit of it, that you've actually mastered. I don't know, you've made an app, right? Or like a prototype of an app or a prototype of a machine that other art publications might look at as an installation, but really a tech magazine might look at it as a prototype of some sort of a technology. So this is why I was saying that angles is really exciting for someone like Yusur. And then I follow usually her excitement and thrill, because with one exhibition, you can come up with 100 angles. And all you need is really research, and you need a bit of creativity and imagination, and the sky is your limit. So I don't want us to only think about angles specifically in the arts and culture, that it's only arts and culture. A writer that writes usually on literature might be interested in your catalog, might be interested in your essay, might be interested in how you've written about your exhibition. So just open kind of your mind on the possibilities of angles.
Especially because our practices are becoming more multifaceted and pretty wide in their breadth of research and asking questions. So yeah, that's a really fair point. I also wanted to talk about something that was extremely useful to me when we were exhibiting Daftar Asfar at Art Dubai last year, and the crunch time of so many people visiting. We created a press kit on our Google Drive. So just something that anytime a journalist came, it was there, it was ready. So bio, 4 approved photos, the captions, just anything, so that it's like, here, you can read this. If you need more, it's there. And I think this is something super useful that everybody needs to kind of have just in case.
Definitely. The press kit is usually linked with either the press release sort of dissemination, or when you're when you're pitching your angle, you can add the press kit there as well. But sending a press kit alone is not enough to journalists, because they do receive thousands of emails every day. So sending only a press kit is not enough. You need to grab their attention with a specific angle that you know that they'd be interested in. And the angles exercise is usually not done once, especially when we are working, let's say, with organizations on a 1-year contract. The angles change with every press release, every press announcement that we make. The angles are not only a one-time thing. They always change. They're always different, and the writers are always different. They're not the same writers that we contact all the time. So you need to have that as well. You need to revisit the angles that you've done, look into it and see how you can change or how you can tweak it to make it better for your next round of pitches. And obviously, according to what you're announcing.
And also, I just want to say something about press kits. I mean, obviously, they're essential. We have like hundreds and thousands of press kits for every exhibition, for every artist, for every organization. But I just want to say that it's so easy to do a press kit now with the availability of Dropbox and Google Drive, where you can just send a link and you can keep updating this link, and this link is live. There was a time, people, and that wasn't a very long time ago, when we used to give USBs. And I mean, I used to give floppy disks. I'm not that old, but it happened. We used to put all the information on floppy disks, and when the information changes, we used to go to the journalists and give them another floppy disk with the press kit, asking them to please discard that one, and sometimes even sit with the journalist, make sure that they're discarding it in front of you if the information that changed is sensitive. So honestly, technology is serving us really well. Aside from dissemination, aside from access, it's also enabling us with tools that are making our access to these journalists and these amazing writers out there very, very easy. Multilingual thinking. This is the slide I'm excited about. So, I mean, we all know that most of us are very fortunate to speak more than one language, and some of us even 3 or 4, and to think with different hats. Yet the communication language evident by our session today remains to be in English, not in any other language. This is the most common language in the world. This is the business language. It's the language of the arts and culture in like so many countries, at least majority of countries around the world. But that does not negate that there are other languages that we communicate with and we think about. So I'm using Arabic here in this specific slide because this is my other language. This is my primary language, and my secondary language is English. And one of the fun things that we do, and we started doing this, I think 5 years ago with every client, is creating an internal glossary. So the moment we start working with, and this is something I'm inviting artists to do as well for themselves and creatives and small businesses, is create a glossary with the English word and the equivalents in whatever language you are speaking, or you're going to create work in, or you plan to disseminate news in, or even have a section on the website with that language. Could it be Arabic, Urdu, Hindi, Tagalog, whatever language you prefer. The reason we do this is because A, it's consistency. So for example, the word commission is taklif in Arabic, but there are other people who might see it differently. You might think it's a different word. The word commissions could be taklifat fanniya, could be not, could be just taklifat. However, in whatever way you define those words, the word installation is tarkib or takwin. These are all conversations you can have with yourself, but you set this glossary for yourself so that every message you craft in the other language is consistent. Some of the biggest mistakes that we've encountered is when artists send us, for example, their bio in English, and then we translate it to Arabic, but then when we are fact checking, we realize that their name is spelled differently in every single organization they've worked with. So, and this is not their mistake. There are different translators and names can be translated differently in Arabic. They can hold, there is that possibility, right? Like a Maryam could be Miriam, right? Nahla could be with an alif, not with a ta marbuta or with a ha. So
it's not marbuta and I get really upset. It's a ha marbuta.
Yeah, there you go. But there are different ways that we can translate the names, and the translators that work in different organizations have so much work on their hands, they don't know that this is how the name is. So first advice is create this glossary. Even if the glossary had 4 things: your name, the name of your artwork, I don't know, the city you were born in, and how you like to reference your work, that it's tarkib, not takwin. And then this list will continue to grow. This is a live document. But also the other advice I give is always make sure that you tell the organization how you like your name to be spelled in the language that they are communicating in other than English, because this will will keep your message consistent, will enable them to have the correct information. They might not have the time. Unfortunately, lots of organizations in the region do translation towards the very end of the project. So it's usually it happens greatly, but in a hurry. So there is no time to go back and forth with all the artists and all the curators to check their names. So make sure that you do your due diligence and send it across. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about is the name of the artwork. And this is something, and I'm a translator myself, this is something that I personally struggle with a lot, especially with artists. Let's say when we're talking in the context of Arabic English, the Arabic English. When I'm translating text to Arabic and the name of the work, for example, is clouds, right? I don't know whether the artist wants to call it sahab, sahab, ghuyum, ghayma, or something completely different. And to my surprise, it's always something completely different, like sama or ufuq, right? And that's absolutely fine. The work lives differently between 2 languages, but make that clear. And if you do not have a translation of your work title because you think in English, and that's absolutely fine, and you don't have a translation of the artwork, then make that clear as well and ask the organization to give you the name prior to publishing. If you don't ask for this, they will not necessarily think it's an issue for you. So once you ask, it's like, I want to know how my work is going to be translated. Can I be connected to your translator? Can I discuss this with them? They say no, that we don't have time. Great. Can you send me options of what my artwork will read like in the other language? And once this happens, you make the communications department life so much easier. You avoid the back and forth with the organization, and also journalists who write in Arabic will capture the essence of your work in the right way. And this applies to your bio, your name. Then there are a lot of people that don't like to put their last name in Arabic, but they put it in English. There are a lot of reasons, tribal affiliations, privacy, they don't want their family to know, but so just ask if you have any concerns, just make them clear at the very beginning. Yes, sir.
And this also, if I may add, this also applies to the angles. Usually Arabic journalists are not always interested in the same angle that you've pitched to an English journalist. So we've given here like an example of one of the big brands internationally. They had an ad that says, create your perfect night's sleep. And in Arabic, it says, for non-Arabic speakers, it says the same as the above, but in Arabic. So they did not write it in Arabic. I think this was a mistake internally, and they've just printed it, and they received a lot of criticism, and they've flipped this into a very creative, sort of very smart marketing tool that they've used on their social media. But this as well applies to angles, applies when you're communicating with journalists, to craft your angles that would suit an Arabic journalist, and craft your angles in English that would suit an English journalist. It's always different. It's never the same. Okay.
You know, it's possibly the fact that it just feels like a lot of effort. Speaking of language, like you were touching on, Maryam, the fact that, yes, we're bilingual, but we often feel very, very comfortable in English, but not so much in Arabic. Then there's the issue of, oh, but in Arabic, the terms are so elaborate, and we don't often find the same vocabulary to describe contemporary art or our practices. Saira Ansari last month actually spoke about something really beautiful when it came to writing as a craft and writing as a form of play. She explained that she is a third culture kid. She is from this region in particular, and will therefore embrace the fact that English is not necessarily her mother tongue. And we should be comfortable with sitting between these two languages and being okay with using both where it fits. And it's almost just redefining or standing up for identity through language, which is why the importance of Arabic is there. But it also becomes, it's often this like afterthought. Oh, I need to translate my website. Oh, I've built my brand. Oh, shoot, there needs to be like an Arabic counterpart. And can you tell us a little bit more why you're seeing this? And I know that you're both pushing a lot to make sure that at least bilinguality is there with your clients.
I think part of it is lack of research. So we think that translators are expensive. Some of them are, some of them are not. The prices differ. They could go, if we're being very, very technical, they could be half a dirham per word if they're really expensive, and it could be 0.1, and it could be 0.5. It depends really on your urgency, what you're translating, who you're working with. So it's research. There are so many translators out there who are ready to just take on a job. You can find them on freelancer websites like Upwork. You can find them on LinkedIn. And also you can really speak to your friends. You'll be very surprised to know of the people that you actually personally know who can either help you translate or know of a great Arabic writer that can benefit with a small financial support, but also you could benefit greatly from his or her writing. So there is that. The other thing is we think it's not important. We genuinely assume that the majority of our audience is an English-speaking audience, and that is just wrong. It is absolutely not true. And I'm only speaking about Arabic, let alone the conversation on the access to the Urdu-speaking communities or the Hindi-speaking communities or the Filipino communities in the specificity of the UAE and the region. But if I want to talk about Arabic, no, that's not true. There are a lot of people who are uncomfortable with reading in English, who are uncomfortable with access to English. So it is really important that you understand what your audience is about, and to not make an assumption that everybody is above everybody is at a certain social class with a certain access to languages. There are people who are even people who are well versed in English or French who prefer reading specific texts in Arabic because they believe that الثقافة هي الفن بالعربي, and they love engaging in that. do not underestimate the importance of access and the proper dissemination to the different audiences that exist in the region. I think you said maybe we can tell the people about this in the toolkit, because I feel like we're running out of time, right? Or not?
Yes.
Minutes to take questions, but you can quickly go through it as well. We have one question from Dareen, which is regarding the SWOT analysis and whether you should be asking the client to complete this exercise and then discuss it with them first. Well, ask them to complete it on their own and then provide your thoughts, or vice versa.
No, it's always better to discuss it with the client, because those questions that you've already prepared before that session, the sort of the SWOT session that you're going to do with the client, you prepare a set of questions, but with a conversation, there are usually additional questions that you think about based on their answers or based on what they're saying. You can ask even more you can ask more questions that could really give you more information that would help you with the PR planning. So it's better to do it with the client or to do it with the individual, because it would be more of a conversation, making them think outside of the box. And so it can help you with your PR planning.
Yeah.
But the client can do it themselves if they're thinking of it from the, like, we're organizational SWOT analysis, but we're also thinking about it from a communications perspective. So it can be a bit different with us, because we're thinking about the threats, for example, in communication, the political crises that could affect their standing, the climate crisis that could affect their specific exhibition that is going to be in the wilderness, for example. So they're totally two things, but definitely a working kind of environment is definitely needed, a consultant and the person who is interested in doing this.
Yeah. Before we move on to the press release, I really loved what you both said to us in our earlier meetings about the dissemination of texts and what is actually available. A magazine like Vogue is not arriving to everyone's door like on a Friday morning, whereas other newspapers are. And so even as we kind of prioritize the different places we want to be featured, we really need to consider the fact that not everybody has access to a certain magazine, and yet we're so attached to this idea of being represented by such, yeah.
You said you go first.
Okay, I think the people follow trends, and if it's cool and trendy to be part of, we're not going to specify publications, but they think if they are in that specific publication that khalas, they've made it. That's not the reality. The more coverage you get, the better recognition that you would get, and better awareness that you are increasing with those articles that are being published about you. Being in top tier publications is not only important. Being in several publications that are daily read by your target audience is more important than the publications that are published once a month or twice a month. So it's really, again, it goes back to knowledge and educating whoever is pitching their angles to journalists, that not only the top tier publications, or if we're going to call them the top tier publications, are important. The daily newspapers are important. Radio is important. TV is important. Podcasts are very important. Social media posts now are very important. So there is no one group that we can target and move forward with. There are several groups that we can think of, several media channels that we can pitch our ideas to and pitch our angles to, so we can get more recognition.
And I want to say something about this, like this idea of discrimination against publications and journalists. And it's strange, because for me, most of the people that I work with constantly tell me that they want students to come, for example, to see this show, or I'm an artist and I want, like the people who live in this city to come and see my show. But please just make sure that I'm only, like, I will not do any interviews as an artist except with X and Y and Z magazines, which happen to be very lovely and amazing exclusive culture and art publications. So I'm like, okay, but this is very confusing, because your key message, your communications objective is to get to X and Y communities, but you reject interviews with X publication because you believe that it's beneath you. That is something that really breaks my heart, because these newspapers, first of all, they will have a completely different angle on your work, whether newspapers or publications or magazines, but the publications that you might consider second tier. And again, this classification is really individual. Like for me, a first tier publication could be depends on how you define them, but this idea that, well, no, actually the journalist does understand your work in the way that he or she understood your work and have captured the essence of this work and translated it in a language that is a bit more understandable to the public that you were seeking to invite. So just think about dissemination and think about the importance of giving equal opportunity to different publications from different sectors and different languages to access your work. Don't only be limited to a small selection of publications. That's always my advice.
And that's one of the challenges. The other challenge is that they have, let's say, an exhibition that is about, let's say, the UAE or about a specific cultural context that they're talking about, but they want international publications to talk about it. Why? Yeah. Why are you thinking international? Why did you jump? Okay, start from the beginning. Start with the journalists that you can build your relationship with here in-house, and then think of jumping into internationally. But there are a lot of challenges that we face with spokespeople in general, whether they're artists or representatives of organizations, but we always have this conversation with them and make them realize that, no, we are right. You need to focus on the local media and then grow from there.
That's so
regional and international, yeah.
To add to that point, we have a good question for you. As a person who works in a PR department, what mistakes or missed opportunities do you want to avoid?
With the media?
As you working in PR. So any mistakes you might make with an artist, let's say, or anyone's work you're trying to cover, or with the media?
I think there are a lot of mistakes that you can, there are a lot of traps that you can fall into. But if we're going to talk media specific, some PR practitioners are two ways. Either they're rude with the journalists, so they don't treat them as normal human beings, and they think that they have to publish their releases or they have to abide to what they're saying, or they're annoying. So they constantly send them emails, call them, message them all the time, and they just don't give them that space to give your story a chance to be read and sort of understood before they get to a response. So that, I think that's one of the mistakes that most PR practitioners fall into. Maryam, I don't know, what other mistakes?
I think mainly disrespecting press and alienating press that you deem irrelevant, when all press is important. All press deserves an opportunity of engagement. I think that's one mistake that should be avoided, and an opportunity to engage with journalists should not be missed. Journalists are writers, they are critics, they are really what this creative field needs all the time in order to build the brand awareness, to build awareness about the artist practitioners. And most of the times these journalists just are flooded with emails, and there's also a hashtag on how horrible PR practices in Dubai on Twitter, which really breaks my heart, and we often read it to realize what not to do. So I would definitely advise whoever asked this to check out this, I don't know what it's called, PR in Dubai or something, a hashtag in Dubai, hashtag on Twitter, but it's honestly just disrespecting journalists and alienating publications. The other thing that I would also add is just communicating, making sure, fact checking and making sure that with your client, you've made sure that all of these facts are right and that you do not send an email to recall, because I don't know how to break it to people. We can't recall emails anymore. It just doesn't happen. You have 2 seconds in Google, I think, to undo an email. So try as hard as possible not to just fact checking is really, really important.
I think one of the other mistakes as well, as a PR practitioner working within an organization or a government company, whatever it is, one of the mistakes that the PR practitioners do is that they take orders and they action those orders without thinking strategically. Why are we dispatching our release? Why are we working on a plan? Why am I contacting this journalist? So they tend to either shy away or not think of the purpose of that request. So not all organizations know what they're doing. Sometimes we receive requests that don't make sense, so we push them back. And we have that conversation with the organization to make sure that what they're doing is right. Not everything that they do is right. We need to question it sometimes to make sure that we understand it properly before we communicate it to anyone else.
I think what you said earlier is so important, finding that angle and really doing your due diligence in terms of researching who this journalist is or who you will be dispensing this information to and why it's relevant to them. We have another question, which is there a difference between the tasks of a marketing employee and a public relations employee?
Yes, they're completely two different practices. They're not the same, and that's a missed sort of they always define PR as marketing and marketing as advertising and advertising as journalism. They're different practices under the umbrella of communication. They're not the same. They have different tools that they use. They have different plans that they think of. They think differently than PR, but they work hand in hand. So they align sort of their plans together to put the communication or the announcement out there. But they work together, but they're not the same. They're completely different departments. Some organizations have them both in one department, like PR and marketing, or PR and communications, and they think social media marketing and advertising is all under that department. It's not wrong, but the proper way of defining communications is that it's the big umbrella that under it falls public relations, social media, marketing, advertising, and journalism. And there are obviously other departments that you can, internal communications, yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. We'll take one more question, which is, can you elaborate more on the inverted pyramid principle?
Sure. So this is the how you think about a press release or a piece of news or any piece of information that you're giving out. So think, if you're thinking of a pyramid, think at the very beginning, you have what we journalists, I mean, because I used to be a journalists consider is our lead paragraph. So the most important information that exists and that you want to communicate, which always is the answer of the WH questions. It's very simple. So what is it? Who is it by? When is it? Where is it? Why is it? And how is it? Once you finish the lead paragraph should tell the journalist or your audience everything there needs to be, like everything they need to know about the basic framework of what you're trying to say. Then if you go down, the middle part of a press release or the middle part of any news that you're writing should be the what we call the meat, right? So the important information. This exhibition was done in collaboration because of this and this and that. It hosts this, it explores this idea, it examines that, and it is done with, it's aligned with another additional programming that will be both online and offline. And then once you've done this, and you can also add a quote by one of the artists or by the artist or the curator or the assigned public spokesperson, because a press release or a piece of news should not be promotional, should not be emotional, should not be selling, right? It's just telling you information. So yes, but I just wanted to say towards the very end, you have the very general information, how to access this place, timings, and obviously wrapping up the end. And this is all available in the toolkit. We are out of time, I'm sorry.
This was wonderful. No, I mean, thank you so much, because there were lots of mythbusters, I think, and you've made it so accessible, and really it's made us realize that we are just as responsible for making sure things are put out there as well. And as we mentioned earlier, all this information is going to be available in our downloadable toolkit, so you can definitely have access to it. If anybody, who you would have liked to have joined this session can join by accessing this online, we will be publishing all our talks. So thank you so much. And Maryam and Yusur. It was very, very valuable. So thank you.
Okay, so Yusur is just like trying to slide in all of the slides
Yes.
as you are speaking, just trying to get as much information as possible. Thank you, everyone. Really, it was such a pleasure. We're sorry we took a lot of your time and we didn't get to have your questions, but our emails are here and you can also follow our Instagram. Needless to say, any Forsa attendee is a friend of ours and we'll be happy to answer your questions by email. And we do just give us 24 hours and we usually answer in email. We tend to not be later than that. Thank you, Nahla. Thank you, Forsa. Thank you, Sharjah Art Foundation. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.